Hi, I'm Julia Griffin, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we're breaking down the story for Sofia Coppola's The Virgin Suicides. The Virgin Suicides came out in 1999. It cost $6.1 million to make and made around $10 million. It's become a bit of a cult classic and has recently, I feel, had sort of a resurgence in pop culture. Let's start with Act 1.
The opening images. Lux on the street eating a popsicle. People walking their dogs, watering their lawns, evoke the mundane life of suburbia.
The iconic shots of the bathroom interior that have graced hundreds, if not thousands, of Tumblr mood boards. Cecilia, the youngest sister, has attempted suicide, slitting her wrists in the bath. This is the opening scene. It draws us and the narrators in. It is a mystery. Why has Cecilia attempted suicide? See a little bit of the neighbors' gossip. The big theory is that Cecilia attempted suicide because she was in love with this exchange student who was in love with a richer, prettier girl, Diana Porter. He jumps out a window at his host family's house, whispering up to the clouds, "I love her." We witness Cecilia seeing this. Her parents, a math teacher and a housewife, Mr. and Mrs. Lisbon, consult a therapist at the hospital where she is recuperating. The therapist tells the conservative religious Lisbons that Cecilia would benefit from interacting with boys outside of a school context. This leads to one of the boys being invited over for dinner. He goes upstairs to use the bathroom and finds a huge stack of tampons in a closet. Lux, the most sexually desirable of the sisters, played by Kirsten Dunst, walks in on him and says that she needs something from the bathroom. She moves to go to the cabinet. He looks at her and she looks at him and says, "It's private." Parents allow her and her sisters to have a small party at their house. The majority of the narrative boys attend this party. We come to the inciting incident, which is, of course, Cecilia's suicide. During the party, she leaves, goes upstairs, and throws herself out a window onto a wrought iron fence below. All of the boys see this. This incident draws the narrators into the mystery of the Lisbons even further. They become obsessed. The narrators begin their search for answers. Why did Cecilia kill herself? Rumors abound, and the local media seizes on the tragedy. Suicide becomes a hot topic as school comes back into session. A reporter, Lydia Pearl, comes to the Lisbon house to interview the girls about Cecilia, but Mrs. Lisbon chases her away. The narrators attempt to get close to the remaining Lisbon sisters. They come into possession of Cecilia's diary, but it provides no real clues. She comments on the boy who had the crush jumping out of the window. How stupid can you be? They see Cecilia in visions, on their beds in the morning, sitting in trees ravaged by Dutch elm disease in their neighborhood, and the wrought iron fence is torn out. Mr. Lisbon sees Cecilia in her old room and rushes to shut the window she jumped out of. Bonnie, her sister, sees him and tells him not to worry. The fence is gone now. The narrators are usually unable to find boys who have talked to Lux and are willing to be honest about it. They brag about their sexual conquests with her. Smell my fingers. We weren't doing much talking. But there was one boy they found to be honest, Trip Fontaine. Trip is a heartthrob. His easy success with most girls and women is not replicated with Lux. She is distant and apathetic. He tries everything he can think of to get close with her, eventually coming over to the Lisbon house to watch TV with her and her family. Mrs. Lisbon does not care for him. Afterwards, he is alone in his car until Lux, like a whirlwind, enters in her nightgown and passionately makes out with him. Just as quickly, she is gone again, needing to get back into the house before bed check. She leaves her chewing gum behind in his mouth from kissing him so hard. Trip's obsession grows, and he asks Mr. Lisbon if he can take Lux to the homecoming dance. Mr. Lisbon tells him his wife doesn't approve of things like that. Trip offers to have other boys from the football team come and take all the Lisbon sisters out together. Mr. Lisbon says that he will talk to his wife. They end up agreeing, and Trip selects 3 other boys to take the sisters out. Coppola reveals Lux's sexual longing for Trip with a quick cross dissolve showing Trip's name written on Lux's underwear, something Cecilia's diary makes a note of Lux doing when she previously had a crush on the garbage man, Kevin. They all pile into the car and go to the dance. The sequence is when we, the viewers, are really closest to the girls. They talk about the neighborhood, the people who live in it, the people they go to school with. And here we come to the midpoint, the homecoming dance. It's beautiful. Trip and Lux are crowned king and queen. They sneak off and make love on the football field. Lux is late for the ride home. The other sisters elect to leave her behind. They are not going to miss curfew. Lux awakens in the morning to find that Trip has left her. She returns home. Mrs. Lisbon is furious. At this point, the sisters are taken out of school by their mother. The narrators are desperate to get any news of them. Lux is forced to burn her rock records by her mother. She cries and begs for them to be spared. The fumes are bad enough for Mrs. Lisbon to throw most of them away in the outside trash. The boys sight Lux making love to men and boys on the roof of the house. The narrators watch through a telescope and binoculars. They call each other on the phone to make sure nobody misses it. The girls are sighted again when a crew from the city comes to cut down the tree outside of their house. This tree was significant to Cecilia and has a plaster cast of her handprint in one of its knots. The sisters form a human chain around the tree, still in their nightgown. The tree cutters beg both the girls and their parents just to let them do their job. The tree is as good as dead and is a risk of spreading the Dutch elm disease that's killed it to other trees in the neighborhood. The girls argue that if the tree is already dead, why not just leave it? Their parents are mostly passive about the development. They suggest alternate treatments. Frustrated, the leader of the crew gives up. Lydia Pearl, the reporter who covered Cecilia's death, returns, eager to get shots of the girls surrounding the tree in their nightgowns. Her presence immediately causes the girls to rush back inside. But this doesn't stop Lydia from putting the story on the news. The girls contact the narrators using poor Morse code, blinked out with a lamp in their window. They call them on the phone and get the sisters to call them back. They play a series of songs to one another to communicate. Later, the phone calls are cut off by Mrs. Lisbon, who has discovered what is going on. The boys begin to find notes from the sisters. They begin to fantasize about saving them. One of them is sent a final note that implies the girls want to be rescued. The boys go to their house late at night. Lux, smoking a cigarette, lets them in. She says she is going to go and start the car. They hear a noise in the basement and go looking for the other sisters, only to find Bonnie hanging from the rafters in the basement. They run away, terrified. The narrator relays that Mary in the kitchen, her head in the gas oven, that Therese, the oldest sister, had died upstairs before they even arrived, having taken an overdose of sleeping pills, and that Lux had died last, filling up the garage with carbon monoxide from the car. Lydia Pearl returns one final time to cover the tragic suicides of the Lisbon sisters. Mr. and Mrs. Lisbon pack up their car and leave quietly one morning. Mr. Lisbon has a friend finish moving out their things, leaving family photos and mementos outside with the trash. Summer comes again, a full year having passed since the beginning of the film. The suburb stinks from a bloom of algae on a nearby lake. The boys note that the adults continue on, business as usual, as if the Lisbon suicides are old hat. Debutante parties continue in the richer part of the neighborhood, one of which is themed asphyxiation because of the terrible smell. At the party, a man throws himself into the pool, mocking teenage suicide. After the party, the boys stand outside the empty Lisbon house, contemplating the sisters and their mystery, which will haunt them for the rest of their lives. Some of the themes of the Virgin suicides are girlhood, a favorite for Coppola, alienation, suicide, human connection, fantasy versus reality, and obsession. All of the Lisbon sisters, save for Lux, the most sexually desirable, and Cecilia, the kook, are almost interchangeable in the view of the sort of boy collective who make up the idea of the protagonist. They blend together in a haze of blonde hair and innocence. They are alienated from everyone, distant, untouchable, more idea than girl. In a June 2000 interview, Kristen Dunst talks about how she felt Coppola really brought out the luminous aspect of the girls. She made them like ethereal angels, almost like they weren't really there. The narrators are entranced and obsessed by the mystery of the sisters, who are swathed in fantasy and gossip. Whenever they are given a real piece of one of the girls, Cecilia's diary, Trip's account of Lux, the family mementos, they immediately go about the work of trying to understand, but ultimately failing, giving their preconceived notions. Frankly, this adaptation is incredible. The novel is very internal and very much the musings of these men about this seminal and traumatic experience of their adolescence. Sofia Coppola loved this book when she read it. She tried to get the rights for it through her father, Francis Ford Coppola, and he couldn't do it. She wrote the script anyway, despite her father advising her not to break her heart. But she approached the owners with the script once the rights lapsed, and they loved it, which ended up in her getting to make this incredible adaptation, her first film at the age of 27. As in the novel, there isn't really a main character. The voice of the narrator serves as a universal internal voice for the boys, who struggle to cope with the memories of the Lisbon sisters. They state that as men, they prefer dreams to wives because of their continued obsession with these suicides. The Virgin Suicides is incredibly faithful to the source material. The film does take a few steps back from some of the more graphic moments in the book. For example, the scene with the tampons in Act 1 and Lex's lovemaking in the later half of Act 2. A lot of the narration, world, and characters are established through hearsay and gossip, just like in the novel. The story is essentially chasing the truth and never really finding it.
Okay, and that's it for me. If you like this video, I always appreciate a like or subscribe. So thanks for watching, and my next breakdown is going to be probably Marie Antoinette, and I have had some votes on my Twitter to do Kajillionaire and SLC's Punk as well, and also Fight Club. Tell me in the comments below if any of those sound super interesting to you.